Mr. Bumani's numbers. Mike, is that correct?
Correct.
And that eliminates the county portion, correct?
Yep.
That eliminates.
We would not be going to the county for abatement. We wouldn't need them.
We couldn't possibly get any kind of approval before June 13th.
So we can work the deal without the county. Yep.
What kind of value were you placing on value for your tax computation?
Oh, I see what you mean. I used the original, what was it, $665,000 of taxable value. I know the cost of construction would exceed that.
$115,000 that you mentioned, 50, what, the 160 and then another 100 plus something, what was that?
The $150,000 that was approved by the EDA in February was for tax increment financing, and according to state law, you could not do a TIF district, and so that $150,000 transferred to $150,000 of tax abatement over a 19-year period of time. And with that, I heard that was too harsh. That it was almost the length of the contract, so that I voluntarily dropped that to tax abatement of 12 years. That the first 5 points under that 12-year tax abatement is 1 through 5, and then if you go if you didn't want to do any tax abatement at all, you could do the or part of it. And there's 5 statements that no assessments on the RCC. The assessments on the motel have been reduced from 192. 118 would be assessed to the property for the remaining life of the bonds. The land price would be the same at 5%. $160,000 would be the same as requested. And then the difference in the replacement of the 12 years, the city finishes the RCC, but is repaid $450,000 over 20 years at 0% interest, despite the actual cost of the completion, even if it's $150,000. Doesn't matter. The city would get back from the operations $450,000. $300,000 from the completion of the community center, the $150,000 loss that you didn't get from FEMA on the tenders. I don't care if you do the 12-year tax assessment or abatement, or the second part of that, one or the other. Financially, it's a better deal for you to do the second part, but yeah, makes no difference to me.
Mike, do you have a comment regarding either one of these?
Yeah, if I could just comment. First of all, we're getting wrapped up in the word tax abatement. Let's just talk about what the purpose of it is. The purpose of tax abatement is to drive down land costs, specifically special assessments on the motel. Right now, you're levying on a bond issue anyway. So whether I call it a bond debt service levy or I call it a tax abatement levy, it's a levy, and it's paying for that bond issue. The idea of the tax abatement, however, is that it formalizes a process that identifies the fact that the motel is going to have new value that you don't have today, and that levy, whether we call it abatement or debt service levy, is now offset by new tax base. So if the project is successful in happening, now the residents of Rushford are paying a little less on that bond issue because the motel is paying its share through the abatement process. So If you decide not to proceed with that, then we will not give the motel the reduction on the special assessments to the same degree. And of course, the city would cover the cost of finishing the community center and recoup $450,000. So perhaps the best way to look at this is what happens in a default situation. In option one, which is more generous than the original terms that had been provided before. Generous from the developer's perspective because they have agreed to less subsidy. If they were to default in that situation, you would be out the share of the taxes that the motel would pay, which is the situation you're in right now because you're paying full freight on the levy anyway. So in the case of option number one, you're not really losing out on that perspective, but you would be losing out on a $160,000 loan if they walk away from the deal. In option number two, the city shells out the cash to finish the community center. So if the motel defaults, you're still paying the levy like you would have on the bond issue, just like under option one. You'd still lose the $160,000 loan just like you would under option one. But the difference would be you've shelled out the cash for the community center with no way to recoup it. Whereas in option one, the developers front the cost of the completion and you would have a finished community center. So in a default situation, you're better off with option one. And if the project is successful, you're better off with option two because you're gonna recoup that $450,000 more than what you put into it. So it depends on whether you're cynical or optimistic which option is better for you.
Since we have moved ahead with some of the projects on the community center, how far is it from being finished? That's my question is, under option one, it says he finishes the community center with private loan. So private loan on what it is right now to finishing? Or you're gonna reimburse the city for everything that we paid up to this point?
That $51,000 that's been paid for by the city is in that $300,000 and is reimbursable.
But not the entire cost of the facility.
Under item one. So we get 50,000 plus whatever it takes to finish?
Right.
Well, let's say that from, yes, it costs $300,000, well, it's probably $250,000 to finish, including that $51,000 of city monies.
And how much do we have in it right now?
We have the five, you have approximately, it's Kathy, 522
Yeah.
plus,
Like that.
yeah, you've got 522.
Right.
With the obligation of the city to be 595 or 600, however you look at it. And then, yeah, that's about where you're at. With a $250,000 of completion.